This episode is brought to you by ZipRecruiter. If you're hiring, it can feel like trying to find a needle in a haystack. There's so many challenges when it comes to finding the right person for your role, like not having enough applicants with the right skill set. And sometimes, it's difficult to even know where to begin. That's where ZipRecruiter comes in. When you post a job on ZipRecruiter, their matching technology finds qualified candidates for you and invites them to apply. In fact, 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. It's no wonder ZipRecruiter is the #1 rated hiring site in the US based on G2 ratings. So while other companies give you too many options, ZipRecruiter finds you the needle in the haystack. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free at this web address, ZipRecruiter.com/Spotify. That's ZipRecruiter.com/SPOTIFY.
Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor and subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. And you can subscribe to us on YouTube at Empire Media, AMPIRE. You should know that by now. It would be much appreciated. Today, I'm joined by USC tight ends coach Zach Hanson, who was the offensive line coach at Tulsa the past 2 seasons. That means he coached Washington 7th-round offensive lineman Chris Paul. He also coached Dallas 1st-round tackle Tyler Smith, and I asked about him too. As far as Paul, we all know that coaches are going to praise their own guys. But Hanson explains why he thinks Paul has a chance to emerge as a real gem in this draft class, and why he thinks Paul will be a starter sooner rather than later. As you know, you can read my work on ESPN.com. Before I play my conversation with Zach Hanson, I want to touch on a couple of topics. Number one, Antonio Gandy Golden. I would say receiver Antonio Gandy Golden, except that he's moving to tight end. This is something that's been in the works for a little while, but they wanted him to sign off on it. So they wanted to get through some of the early offseason workouts to see how he took to it, see what he thought about it. Well, now it's going to happen. He had put on a good bit of muscle in the offseason. People had seen him. Few people had told me how good he looked, how big he looked. So clearly he was ready for such a move. But they wanted to make sure, again, after he'd worked there for a little bit, that he was on board with it. Because if he's not, it would be difficult. The coaches seem genuinely excited about what he's shown thus far. Keep in mind, until we see him in a game, it's hard to know how anybody or he or anybody is really doing. One reason it worked so well for Niles Paul, he was tough as you know what. But you saw the mindset as a receiver that he carried to tight end. It's why he could line up as an on-the-ball tight end or an online tight end and still compete as a blocker. That's what you need. And I still talk about this all the time. When he was a rookie, when he was a receiver as a rookie, he took one corner and drove him 15 yards on a run play, drove him out of bounds. It was enough that I would go back and watch these games, as you know, and I saw that and I kept rerunning it. And I called my son in, who was playing youth football at the time. I said, if anybody else ever asks you how you need to block as a receiver, this right here is the definition. But it was the mindset that Paul had that allowed him to go from receiver to tight end after bulking up. So we still have to see that part of it. Gandy Golden apparently has taken enough steps this spring. The coaches feel good about his potential ability to help. Again, so much more to learn. It's not just as much as, run a route from here or here. It's you will have to do, there are different responsibilities in the run game, for example, and you will have to get used to running routes from a different area. But if he can make it, he would give them another athletic tight end whom they can maybe develop at that position. I think it also, when you look at some of the tight ends they're bringing on, Cole Turner, you already have John Bates, you have Logan Thomas, who will be back at some point. If Gandy Golden hits, what happens with Sammis Reyes? And, you have Graves, the tight end, who is an undrafted free agent, who I know Logan Paulson really likes. So how is that all going to shake out? Will there be room for a guy like Sammis Reyes? Well, he can go out there and win a job. It adds a lot more competition and choices, makes it kind of interesting too. So we'll see. But they're going to be doing this with the new tight ends coach in Juan Castillo. How will that impact it? Well, we'll find out. But I think this is interesting that Gandy Golden will be moving there. And it's funny because a year ago at this time, I got a lot of questions from listeners and about would they move Gandy Golden to tight end? And the answer was no at that time. He was coming off a year where he had some injuries. They wanted to see what he could do as a receiver. So, and he wanted to see what he could do as a receiver. The guy that they wanted to move to tight end last year was Kelvin Harmon. Didn't want to do it. Now, ironically, now that AGG is switching, it's Harmon who has had a good start to the offseason as a receiver. I've heard his name a couple times come up from coaches just about like, hey, this guy's had has had a good spring. Again, all it means is he's had a good spring. Let's not get carried away. But I think, what they like about him is he plays big and physical, starting to get some of that quickness back that they like. Not a fast guy, but that size can help him be a good target for Carson Wentz. So, don't be surprised. Again, it's only May 19th that I'm recording this. So don't be surprised if they once again keep 7 receivers. But there's a long way to go, folks. But like I said, it's just a guy whose name I've heard a couple times. And now you have Gandy Golden going over to tight end. Usually guys are going to switch when they think it's, probably necessary to extend their career. And so I think it's a good try for Gandy Golden to make this move. And if he hits, it gives them another athletic tight end. As far as training camp goes, I told you this the other day, and while nothing is official as of now, I expect them to practice in Ashburn and no joint workouts. I think an issue in Richmond is how spread out everything is. I love Richmond. I think people there like going to Richmond, but they stay at a hotel downtown, take buses to practice, etc. If Washington ever goes anywhere under Ron Rivera, it would be somewhere that's a little bit more isolated and more conducive to just kind of moving easily and freely from one building to another, where you don't have to get bused to the facilities. If that happens, if they find a place like that, I could see them going. For now, expect them to be in Ashburn. When they were way back in the day, when it was the Redskins and you practice, they were at Carlisle, they were at Frostburg. Players could walk. You could sometimes take a cart, but you're walking from the dorms to the fields, walking from the dorms to the CAF to the dorm, back to the dorms, et cetera. And I think it just develops a different level of bonding. Now, not that those teams were always great when they were in Frostburg, but I do think it develops a different level of bonding than if you're just busing. But, in Ashburn, it's not like, it's a spread out situation there too. So, but anyways, expect them to be there. As for the joint workouts, I think those are a good idea. Not sure exactly why they don't have any scheduled for this year. It would have been Carolina because that's the first preseason game. I do think Ashburn is a tough place for it if you're an opposing team. There's a lot of value in those workouts. One thing Jack Del Rio told Julie Donaldson on Commanders TV is that the defensive back, the secondary, struggled with some of the communication issues early because he didn't feel like everybody in the secondary had great attendance in the OTAs. Or, for example, Bobby McCain wasn't signed until later in the spring. Landon Collins was hurt. They don't play their starters much in the preseason. So one way to learn about guys is from practicing against another team. It's not a death sentence not having them, but I find value in them, especially with how teams have changed their preseason approach. And I would also say, too, if there are guys who are struggling with those communication issues, then perhaps, what you have to do then is scale some things back early on. And I think they eventually did. And I think that's why why they got off to a sluggish start. Their coverage was poor. But I think also they turned things around in part because I do think they guys got used to some things, but they also tweaked what they were doing. And I think that helped as well. It'll be interesting to see how corner James Bradbury fares in Philadelphia. He's a damn good zone corner, and the Eagles' coverage splits are similar to those of Washington and New York when it comes to playing man and how much zone. Bradbury, of course, played in New York. They recently cut him. Of course, the head coach here, Ron Rivera, had Bradbury in Carolina. I think a lot of it here, as far as Bradbury was, when that the feeling that they didn't want to tie up that $10 million in the cap as they negotiate with others for extensions. That money could be used to perhaps include some money now on extensions for this year, or it can be carried, if there's extra money, can be carried over after the season to create a little bit more room to keep some of these guys. Plus, there's curiosity as to what Benjamin St. Juste can do as a third corner. And I'm not sure that they felt like Bradbury was prohibitively better than what they had for what they're doing. We'll see if they're right. We'll see if the strategy is the right one. I would say that Darius Slay in Philly is a strong man corner. So in some ways, it's an interesting pairing. Similar to what I would have said had Bradbury come here, because William Jackson is much more of a man corner. Bradbury hasn't been a playmaker necessarily over the course of his career, but he is good. And I said this on the podcast last week, but I like what the Eagles have done this offseason. I do have questions about Jalen Hurts as a consistent passer, and I do wonder about their defense. Even though I think there's good talent there, when they were building some of those impressive stats, they were playing some really bad quarterbacks. So I wonder how much that impacted, and we'll find out, of course, this year. And that's why that third game will be an interesting one, or the early season matchup. Well, excuse me, I guess that's the fourth game, will be an interesting one. One guy I'll be interested to watch evolve is rookie safety Percy Butler. I don't know if he'll be able to handle the third safety role right away or not. I do think he'll get there. In talking to people who know him well, he's the no-nonsense kid who doesn't think he's made it. And he comes, funny thing is he comes from the same area as Brian Mitchell in Louisiana. And one of the things that Brian Mitchell would always say is when he came here as a fifth-round pick, he'd say what separated him is a lot of people get here and think they made it. He goes, I didn't think I made it. And he worked every day like that. And I think if this kid does carry out that same mentality, then I think they'll be in really good shape. And by the way, that Eagles game is week 3. So I apologize. I couldn't remember if they were week 3 or 4, and Dallas is, in there as well. So there you go. Anyway, it'll be interesting to see how James Bradbury fares in Philadelphia. He's a damn good zone corner, and the Eagles' coverage splits as far as man versus zone are similar to those of both Washington and New York, where Bradbury played the last 2 years. And of course, in Washington with the head coach he once played for in Carolina. I think a lot of it here was the feeling that they didn't want to tie up even $10 million on the cap this year as they negotiate with others for extensions. And remember, it's not just McLaurin, it's also Daron Payne. It's also Cole Holcomb. Antonio Gibson's going to be up in another year as well. That money could be used to perhaps include some money now on the cap if they wanted to bump some money now, or it can be carried over after the season to create a little more room. Plus, there's curiosity as to what Benjamin St-Juste can do as a third corner. He was progressing when he started suffering all these concussions. My concern is will he have that issue again this year? I don't like the depth at corner. I think they need more in the secondary in general. So we'll see if the strategy is the right one. I also wonder with Darius Slay, he's a strong man corner. So in some ways, it'll be an interesting pairing. Similar to what I would have said had Bradbury come here and paired with a corner in William Jackson, who's much better in man and was still learning zone when he got hurt last year. Bradbury has not been a playmaker over the course of his career, but he is good. And I said this on the last podcast, but I like what the Eagles have done this offseason. I still have questions about Jalen Hurts as a consistent passer, and I wonder about their D and how good it is. I do feel like a lot of their numbers were kind of similar to what Washington did the previous year, where you build it up against some very questionable quarterbacks. And how much of that factored into Philly's success last year defensively, or how much of it was it just, hey, that's a really good defense? Well, I think we'll find out, and we'll see here early in the season when the Eagles come here in week 3. And I think it'll be interesting to see how that defense develops. Certainly going to be something to watch offensively with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. And again, if Hurts develops as a passer, then they could be a really interesting team next year. One guy I'll be interested to watch evolve is rookie safety Percy Butler. I don't know if he's going to be able to handle the third safety role right away or not. I do think he'll get there. In talking to people who know him, he's a no-nonsense kid who does not think he's somehow made it. Now, go back to, he's from Plaquemine, Louisiana, where Brian Mitchell's from. And the one thing I always remember with Brian Mitchell, and I talked about this years ago, he was a 5th-round pick. And some guys get here and think they've made it. Brian Mitchell said when he got here, the last thing he thought was that he had made it. He felt like he had just begun. And I get the same sense with Butler. He goes to practice, goes home, studies his playbook. He'll have somebody quiz him over the phone about the playbook and about plays that happened in practice, et cetera. and he'll have, and the other, somebody on their line will ask him to draw up some plays on a whiteboard, that kind of stuff. So he's really kind of getting into it. So I think that gives him a chance. One note is that his girlfriend stayed behind. They had the newborn child right after the draft. So, but she stayed behind so he could dive into his playbook up here and really have no distractions, spend this time focused on football. She'll join him soon. And I think everything says he's excited to be a dad. But right now, I think he knows that to have a longer career, a good start would be very helpful. And I think they definitely are eyeing him for that third safety role, which means he's got a lot on his plate just to learn what he has to learn up here. Anyway, that's it from me. After this break, I'll be back with Zach Hanson, who coached Chris Paul at Tulsa and thought he was drafted way too low. Find out why.
This is an ad for Roundup Weed and Grass Killer with Sure Shot Wand. It kills weeds down to the root, so they don't come back. It works for you, your neighbor, your neighbor's neighbor, and his neighbor's neighbor. It's Roundup Weed and Grass Killer with Sure Shot Wand. When used as directed, always read and follow pesticide label directions.
This episode is brought to you by Simple Mobile. Tired of being tied down with a wireless contract? Switch to Simple Mobile and stay connected on a powerful nationwide 5G network. Unlimited talk, text, and data starts at $30 a month with no contracts, activation fees, or credit checks. Visit simplemobile.com today. Out with the old, in with the simple. Compatible 5G capable device and SIM required. Actual availability, coverage, and speed may vary. 5G network not available in all areas. 1 month equals 30 days. See terms and conditions at simplemobile.com.
Welcome back. Now here's my conversation with Zach Hanson. Zach, I appreciate you joining me. And so I want to ask you about a couple players, and one of whom is a Washington now rival, Tyler Smith. But let's start with Chris Paul, whom the Commanders drafted. You coached him for 2 years at Tulsa. So what are they getting? What are they getting in Chris Paul?
I think Chris is an incredibly talented young guy. Honestly, I think he's probably one of the biggest steals of the draft going in the 7th round. Incredibly diverse, can play guard, can play tackle. Extremely smart. I mean, he's a one-of-a-kind guy, really. And, I'm really excited for him.
What do you think teams overlooked maybe in him lasting to the 7th round?
I'm not sure. I mean, obviously he's a really athletic guy. I think he ran like a 4.89 40 at 325 pounds. Very quick, good feet, all those things. So I know they all have their process, and I'm sure they have their reasons for why he dropped that far. But it is what it is. I mean, he's going to make the most of that opportunity. I've told him, and I've told multiple people, I think that guy has the opportunity and the ability level to be a multi-year starter in the NFL. Based off the guys I've seen and been around and helped coach and all those things throughout the years, he's a really special one.
Who are some other guys that you would compare him to that you've coached that say like maybe were in a similar situation where you felt they were overlooked or went on to have a really good career or something like that?
I'm not sure even really overlooked guys. I was around for Dalton Reisner. I was at Kansas State for a long time, so I was with Dalton Reisner, Cody Whitehair, who are both multiple-year starters in the NFL. I was able to be around Creed Humphrey at Oklahoma. A handful of guys throughout the years that were and are really high-end NFL players. And I think Chris has that same type of ability level. A few of those guys might be a little bit more polished in regard to like knowing more football stuff, maybe just right off the cuff, but he's a quick learner and incredibly smart kid. And, I think he's just really going to thrive in whatever system gets thrown at him. So, I just truly believe he's got that high-end ability level.
What are some of those traits that he has that he shared with some of those others?
His foot quickness, his athleticism is very, very impressive. He's as quick and as explosive as any of the people I've ever been around. I think the other thing is just his ability to process information. He's incredibly smart. He was a cybersecurity major at Tulsa, and was working on a master's and all that stuff. So from a just straight IQ standpoint and all those things, he's incredibly smart and able to make adjustments and all those type of things. And really, he handles adversity really well. You can coach him hard and kind of get after him, and it doesn't rattle him in games, and that's incredibly important as an offensive lineman as well.
How many players have you had whose dream job was to be the Secretary of Defense?
Yeah, there's not many. It's kind of I talked to Chris the other day and I said, hey man, this is like a perfect scenario. You're in Washington, DC. I mean, you're right down the road from all the things you want to do in life after football and all those things. And, so we got a good laugh out of it, but he is one of a kind, man. He truly is. He's a really special young man, and he'll do great in whatever he does after football as well. But I think he's got a long career ahead of him in football.
You talk about overcoming adversity. Were there some times where you'd see that with him? Like, was there an example of something, whether it's tough practice, tough game, tough moment, that you felt like he handled it really well?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, man. I mean, I could sit here all day and talk about it. I think one that kind of stands out, and it kind of goes to his versatility. When I got to Tulsa, he was a left guard, and that's all he had played in college. And I decided to move him to right tackle because it was what was best for our unit and our team at the time, and really for him too. I told him at the time, I said, hey man, this is really going to help you in your NFL career. I know that's what you want to do. Like, they're going to want to see diversity in your game. So I'm going to move you from the left side to the right side, move you to a tackle. And he handled it great. There was a little bit of hesitation at first, but I mean, he jumped straight in and really started going to work. And, he worked his tail off to make himself a really good right tackle for us. So that was one. That was right when I first got here, got a new coach, got a new position, trying to prove yourself, all those things. And just battling through that adversity. But there's some other times too in games where somebody would go down, somebody would get dinged up, somebody would have a cramp or something, and I'd have to move him to left tackle or move him to left guard. And he could just handle it, and not a lot of guys can do that. And he didn't complain about it. He didn't say anything. He said, let's go. Like, I'm ready to go. Let's jump in and do it. And so, there's 100 stories I could tell you like that about Chris, and that's the type of guy he is. So.
With going back to the brains aspect, because as you know, like there can be guys who are really smart who it doesn't translate to the field. How does it translate to the field for him?
I think he does a really good job. He's a note taker. He's a guy that he's really going to be listening and hanging on every word you say in that meeting room. And I've spoken to the O-line coach with the Commanders and kind of conveyed that to him as well. And he really is a great young guy to coach because he listens in the meeting and he takes it to the field and translates it to the field. And he's really good. Like even in game, if you make an adjustment in game, he's got it, and really without any hesitation. I never have to worry about him. I was really blessed. I didn't really have to worry about either of my tackles throughout the whole season. Those guys were really both just great players. But Chris was the guy kind of leading the show for us too. I mean, he was the leader of our group, and all that came from his confidence in his play.
Yeah, he definitely seems like an outgoing kid and a very confident kid. I mean, I think there's a lot that he has going on with the music and also the post-career aspirations. So he does seem like a confident young man.
Yeah, he absolutely is. And he's really amazing how many things he was really able to juggle and all that. I know that was a concern for some guys coming out, but it's something that he's just able to do it. And instead of taking his time, taking naps and doing the things like most normal college kids did, he took his time. He was playing ball, taking care of his body and trying to really get the full college experience and come out as well-rounded as possible. And so I have a ton of respect for him for all the things he was able to do and do all of them at a really high level.
You listen to his music?
I have listened to all his music. I've been to his concert. I've been to a bunch of things. So he's a special young guy to me.
What kind of entertainer is he on stage?
He's a great entertainer on stage. A lot of energy, kind of gets everybody into it. I mean, the more you get to know Chris, the more personality will come out. I think it'll be really fun to watch him in the NFL as he kind of continues to make his own name and see how the fans and how the people respond to him.
Did you see a different personality on stage, or was that who he was when you saw him in the meeting rooms and all that?
He's got a little bit more personality when he goes on stage. I think I think that's a release for him a little bit. He can be just real open, be himself. And really just kind of cut loose up there.
Did he surprise you, like with the music? Was that a surprise to you when you first heard about it or saw him or anything? Or
Yeah, I think it's a surprise to everybody. I think, as football players, it's usually not like a normal thing, but the more I was around Chris, the more I realized like this dude ain't just like a normal player. He's involved and he's the president of SAC for the conference. Yeah. He's a musician. He's a great student. He's a great player. He's the leader of the team. He really was like, he's probably the most unique player I've ever coached in that regard. And like I said, man, I got a lot of respect for him because I think back when I was a player his age, I was spending my time with ball and, grinding my way through the classroom and working on my body and doing all those things. And I'm like, shoot, man, this guy's doing 10 times more things than I was doing. And he's excelling probably more than I was.
I think that most people were doing at that age. Certainly, I mean, I know I wasn't doing any of that.
21-year-old dude, and so he really is incredible.
As a player, would you describe him still as a little bit raw at right tackle?
Yeah, there's always things he's got to work on, just like everybody. I really think he could go in and be a day one starter. I really do. At guard or at tackle, I think he's probably more suited as a guard, but I think that Washington probably saw him as a guy that could do a lot of different things, and that's the appeal for him, and that's kind of what I told him when we started this thing. And I said, shoot, man, if you have this versatility, you're going to have to get kept around, and you have a body type and you have the athleticism and the brains and ability to be able to do that. And you're really blessed to be able to do that. So I usually teach both my guys to go right and left. So again, give them versatility, but to be able to play guard and tackle. And if you teach him how to snap, that dude can play center too, I think. And so he's really an intriguing prospect, I'm sure, for Washington.
Last thing on him, then, what would be one or two of the things where you'd say, okay, he probably has to work on this to reach the level that you feel he can?
Yeah, I think it's just like the initial. He's such a strong and powerful kid. Translating all that over onto the field, I think, is the number one thing, and it's in there. He has it in his tank. It's just being a truly like dominant player in the run game. And he's very aware of that, and he knows that, and so the coaches, and that's something they're going to get out of him, and so I'd say that was probably the main thing. But again, there's games he would just go in and take over, and that's why he's where he's at right now.
So another guy, the last guy I want to ask you about is Tyler Smith, because going to the Cowboys in the first round, I also know that this team really liked him, because I actually asked somebody here, like, hey, what do you think about Tyler Smith? And the response back was, shh. Because they didn't want like anybody get it. I think everybody hoped to keep him a secret going in this draft. What can you tell us about him? And what is Dallas getting in Smith?
Yeah, I think everybody was hoping that he was going to go the third round. Anybody that's been around Tyler and watched that kid play football knows that he's a first round draft pick. He is the most talented person I probably have ever been around. Just God-given ability, and a special young guy. And that's saying a lot because Chris is a heck of a player too. You know what I mean? And both those guys, man, I think their ceiling is so high. Tyler's he just turned 21 years old. He's still a young guy, but an incredible talent. Great young guy. I think the Cowboys got a great one.
What stands out about his game?
There's not a lot of college football players when you turn on their tape that they drive people off the screen. And I think that's the biggest thing with Tyler is he does that every single rep. He comes out and he's trying to hurt people, and he has incredible strength, and flexibility and strength and all those things together. Big people like him shouldn't be able to bend and do the things that he does. And that's why he's a first round draft pick. He's got all the tools to be an elite, maybe Hall of Fame player. If it all works out, and we know that's a lot. It's big shoes to fill. A lot of things to say about somebody, but he's got that ability level in him. I really do think he does.
So did you because again, you're right. When I talk to people about him, especially people who liked him, like initially it was thought, well, he might be a third round pick. And the more I talk to people who watched him, they're like, there's no way he's lasting that long. Like they didn't think that Washington at 47, they might be too late for him. So when did you feel like he might be in that first round range based on what you'd hear from teams?
Immediately.
Okay.
There was some. I got everything from 7th round to 1st round, and
7th round.
Yeah, I mean, this is like throughout a year process of guys coming in, and well, he's still young, he's raw, and I'm like, yeah, I get it, but I also know what you look for. I've seen guys get taken in the 1st round that probably weren't like the most polished guys and all that. And I really, like I said, I've been around a lot of 2nd round draft picks, and they aren't even close from a natural ability standpoint. They're probably more polished. But Tyler's ability level is just off the charts, and he's everything every NFL team wants in regard to the physicality that he brings to the game and the mentality that he plays with. And so, I really, when he declared, and even before that, I told him, look, man, like before I left, I told him, your bottom's gonna be at the 3rd round. That's probably the lowest you'll potentially go. So if you're good with that, then maybe that's where you should go get drafted, and I truly felt like that was the lowest you possibly go is 3rd round. There's no way.
Last thing on him, where or what is it that he would, that maybe held some teams back from thinking automatically 1st round? Is there an area that you say, like, he's got all that talent, but he's got to work this to get to that level?
Yeah, I mean, just the small technique and fundamental things. He was when I was at Tulsa, he had 3 years left with us at Tulsa. So he was in college for 3 years. He redshirted and played 2 for me. So he's still learning. He's still growing. So he's still got to work on his hand placement. He's still got to work on a lot of little technique and fundamental things. But from the athleticism and strength and agility and toughness and all those other things, man, he's different than everybody else in that draft. I mean, that is really what it comes down to. He wasn't as polished as some of those guys, but when you really look at the raw ability factor, he's off the charts.
Zach, I appreciate your time and your insight. Thank you very much. It was great.
Yeah, thanks, John. I appreciate it.
This episode is brought to you by Clutter. Too much stuff and not enough space? Use Clutter's on-demand smart storage solution to store your stuff without lifting a finger. Their licensed moving professionals will pack, photograph, and pick up your items. And if you need to, you can use a personal online photo catalog to get your items back to your doorstep. Take back your space. Visit clutter.com/Spotify and get $50 off with the promo code Spotify.
This episode is brought to you by Cheetos Deja Tu Huella. Deja Tu Huella means leave your mark, and that's exactly what Latinos are doing all across the country. They're rewriting the rules and pushing the boundaries in their communities to leave their own unique mark. They use their gift, their superpoder, to make an impact, whether it's through art, music, fashion, food, or something else. And Cheetos will celebrate what they're doing by shining a light on their transformative power. The Deja Tu Huella program celebrates those leaving their mark in Latino communities. You can also celebrate by checking out the new podcast, Batman Unburied, on Spotify. Batman Unburied is presented by Cheetos Deja Tu Huella. Visit Batman Unburied on Spotify to learn more.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Zach for joining me. He was out on the recruiting trail for USC, so I appreciated him tuning in or calling in. And thank you, as always, for listening. I'll be back with my old pal, Doc Walker, Sunday night. Doc was fired up, man. Talk to you next time.